Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to the first ever episode of Not D&D. This is the show where we talk about tabletop RPGs that are not Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you very much for coming along today. My name is Jessica Hancock. I'm the host of the show, and today we have a very special guest with us. Morrus, would you like to introduce yourself?
Special is a strong word.
Well, I have to say that because you're my boss. So.
That is technically true, yeah. Yeah, so I'm Morrus, aka Russ, or Russ, aka Morrus, and I run a tabletop role-playing game news website called EN World. I run EN Publishing, which produces the Awfully Cheerful engine, Level Up, Advanced 5th Edition, and other things. And I do other things too. Many other things, but there are a couple of the things that I do.
Okay, excellent. As some of you watching will know, so EN Live, which is what Not D&D streams on, is kind of part of EN World and EN Publishing, which is why we had Russ on for the first episode, so we can just talk a little bit about ourselves and introduce ourselves. Each week we'll be having different guests though, so we're talking about different indie RPGs that aren't ones that we produce, but this week we will be talking about games that we produce here. This one here. Just wait, I know you're excited, Russ. So as we go through, I've got all the comments here. So we're streaming across Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. So if you're on any of those and you want to have a little chat, just leave a comment and a question and we'll be able to put it up on the screen and we'll be able to show it to things like this. Thank you very much, John. We've also been looking forward to this too. So if you have any questions, pop them in and we'll just talk them as we go. So, getting into the meat of things, there's a question that I want to get into first. Is the show is called Not D&D. Russ, why do you hate Dungeons and Dragons?
See, I am probably the world's biggest D&D fan. On the
okay.
Planet. I spent the last 20 years. I spent the last 20 years of my life reporting news on Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And I decided to do that 20 years ago when let's just say. I was not making money from doing that at all. It was
shocking.
Yeah. I was the biggest D&D fan in the world. So I ran a D&D news website for many, many years, enthusiastically following up every single, going through 3rd edition, 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition. So yeah, I'm the opposite of a person that hates D&D. I'm a massive, massive D&D nerd.
And also someone pointed out, we also publish some 5e products as well. So we have Insider, which is the weekly. You get your D&D content. You can subscribe to that on there. And we also have Level Up as well. And also other 5e things like mythological figures. But I'm not going to talk about that a lot because this is not D&D. So we're not going to talk about those products. We're going to talk about other different products. But I did just want to get out there that we don't hate D&D at all.
We love D&D.
Absolutely don't. I myself really enjoy D&D. I'm in a campaign that we've been in for I think coming up to 4 years now, and I think I see my GM there, so I'm going to be on very good behavior talking about it. But yeah, so I've been in that campaign for years, so I play that a lot as well, so really enjoy it. But I just really enjoy loads of other RPGs, and I think D&D has grown in popularity and RPGs, the whole industry in the last few years, which is great. But I kind of want to showcase other games so people can try other things because, variety, spice of life and all that, I guess. Or some cheesy quote.
That's all right.
Anyway, but getting don't badmouth the GM. Yes, that's absolutely right. Someone commented. Yes, I think my character might get killed if I do that, or something bad might happen. Who knows? But yeah. So so getting into the meat of what we're talking about today. So today we are talking about an RPG, Awfully Cheerful engine, which we have at EN Publishing. But before we get into that, I wanted to dig in a little bit more, Russ, into your kind of background with RPGs. So you gave us a brief little summary there, but when did you start playing role-playing games? Did you play before the internet existed, back in the olden times, or?
I'm only 21, so that's impossible. But
wow.
Yeah. So when I was 11, I think, when I just started secondary school, that is when I and my friends started playing D&D at lunchtimes. So we were playing AD&D First Edition at the time.
First Edition. That's very retro.
I know.
Is that when people thought that you were going to like summon Satan or something if you were playing that?
Well, I never experienced any of that.
Okay.
I think that was more in the US,
Okay.
but I personally never experienced any of that. I think a lot of people did think I was just a giant, nerd because I was playing D&D, but that's about as bad as it got.
Were they wrong?
They are not wrong. I'm very proud to be a giant.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, great. So you started playing when you were like 11, and when did you start working in the industry? So I think you said about 20 years that you started doing EN World.
Oh, in my early 20s, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I started running EN World, started in about 2000, 2001, something like that, or 99, somewhere around there anyway. At the beginning of the century. So I started running EN World then, and that was kind of reporting on D&D 3rd edition news, and it was like D20 system news, which is like all the big sort of third-party stuff for D&D at the time. So that was basically my main gig at the time, and we started EN Publishing, which at the time was called Natural 20 Press. We changed the name later. Probably 2001, 2002, maybe. But back then it was like a side gig. It was a hobby. It was, EN Publishing wasn't making enough money to pay, like, your salary, for example, back then. That wouldn't have been an option back then. And of course, all the things like Twitch and Facebook didn't exist, and Twitter didn't exist, and
the internet was new.
Well, the internet existed, but social media didn't. So. So I guess like forums, like the EN World Forum, was social media at the time. It kind of predated Facebook and Twitter. It's how people came together and talked about D&D, and still is. It's still here 20 years later, and it's still going strong, and it's still a popular forum, which I'm kind of amazed about because I really didn't think it would last that long, but it has.
Oh, really?
And it's, well, you think technology changes, things change. Are forums still going to exist in 20 years' time? Answer: yes, apparently they do. And who knows? I mean, maybe they'll still be around in another 20 years. I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
Well, for me, I find the forums really useful because sometimes whenever if I just Google or generic search engine of your choice, something to do with like definitely D&D or something, usually someone's asked that question on the EN World Forum, so it pops up on there, so I can just get the answer there if someone in my party doesn't already know, which they normally do. But yes, okay. So you started with EN World, and then EN Publishing is kind of grown into this bigger thing. When were you able to go full time with EN Publishing and make that your day job?
Do you know what? I don't know when it was exactly. That would have been early 2000s. I took the big risk, left my job at the time.
Time's a contract, so you don't have to know the exact date, but yeah. Yeah,
exactly. But so I was doing a call center job at the time. I left that and started doing the site full time. And I was really like living hand to mouth with nothing at the time. So it was a real struggle for a lot of years. I was barely making the bills or anything like that. So I probably shouldn't have gone full time. But I guess it worked out in the end. And then, it just very slowly and gradually grew over the years. Where it is now, it's it's doing well now. It's enough to pay people's salaries, and make a living, a full-time living from, and publish big hardcover books and have
big
amazing
shiny
Kickstarters.
books.
So it worked out all right in the end.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I mean, I think a lot of people that work in the games industry, definitely it starts out being like a side hustle, then maybe something they do part-time with the aspiration of moving to full-time. I mean, that's how I started with EN Publishing. Started in 2019 as a publishing administrator, and I was doing it was like 10 hours a week. So I was doing other bits and pieces for other companies as well. And then over time, the company got to a place where it could have a full-time employee. And I had escaped and gone to somewhere else, but ended up getting pulled. I came back because you said I could do this show, so I did.
Is this the only reason you came back to do this show?
Yes, 100%. There's no other reason. I wanted to sit here and specifically speak to these 22 people we're speaking to now and do that. Thanks very much for coming. A couple of people have joined, so just to say this is not D&D. Please feel free to ask questions and make comments as we go and talk through. So feel free to jump in, and we will pop up your questions on the screen. So if you ever want to say hello, feel free. And we'll try and answer the questions as well if you have any for us. So Okay, that's a little bit about you. Unless anyone has any questions for us about working in the games industry and EN world and publishing and stuff like that, I might move us on to talk about the thing that we all came here to talk about today, which why are you laughing? Is the Awfully Cheerful Engine. So this is the game we're talking about today. So yes, we have a pretty copy of the book here. So shall I roll the video to get us started in that? And then we'll jump into talking about it. Okay, let me figure out how to do this. Here we go. Boom. So that was the Awfully Cheerful Engine.
That trailer, very good. And I think whoever made it must be very, very handsome and clever.
Was it you? Did you make that? Okay.
It was me who made that.
Okay, so that was like a brief kind of intro into the Awfully Cheerful Engine with like pretty pictures and give us some sense for the setting and stuff. But so if you had to give your elevator pitch, which you presumably did when we did the Kickstarter back in June, was it June 2021? July?
Maybe
in the summer of 2021 when the Kickstarter came out.
What happened during the pandemic? I mean, time just kind of conflated and expanded like this kind of wibbly wobbly weird thing. I've got no idea when anything was.
It was the summer of 2021 when the Kickstarter came out. So what was the elevator pitch for the Awfully Cheerful Engine? So if I said, Ross, in like 60 seconds, tell me what the Awfully Cheerful Engine is.
So
I'm timing you now.
My 60 seconds start now. So
yeah, they started like 5 seconds ago.
Okay. So if I just waste enough time, I don't have to talk for 60 seconds. Is that how it works?
Well, it's a long live stream, man. You're going to keep talking for a while.
Right. So Awfully Cheerful Engine is a tabletop role-playing game designed to be rules light and focusing on action comedy. So if you think about sort of cartoon animals, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or well, if you just look at the cover, you've got sort of robots and dinosaurs and elves, and any kind of genre you want, you can pretty much play with the Awfully Cheerful Engine. And it's designed for kind of one-shots, live streams. If you're playing in a campaign and the GM's away for a couple of weeks, pick up your Awfully Cheerful Engine and maybe play through Spirits of Manhattan or Montana Drones or something like that. So it's designed to be, it's easy and quick enough to learn that you can pick it up, play it. Your character sheet is the size of a credit card. It's that simple. Amazing. And it's super, super fast to learn. And it's just, when you play this game, you just spend the whole time laughing. It's fun.
So not like a dark, gritty kind of setting. So
no.
Okay.
No.
Well, the name really misled me there, being the Awfully Cheerful Engine. I thought it was going to be like a gritty horror.
And I totally didn't take the word ace and totally try to retrofit 3 words to fit that at all. That totally did not happen.
See, it's not like that's something you do with like What's Old Is New or something, and just like it a few. Okay, that's great. So
I am amazing at naming things, and I will hear nothing otherwise.
Really? Do you want to tell us the name of your podcast? Okay, we had this discussion the other day, so I'm going to bring everyone else into the argument. So what's the name of the podcast that some people might know?
The podcast is excellently named.
Yes, go on then.
The podcast probably has the best podcast name you could possibly have.
Okay.
It has all the things that I like about a name. It's really long.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to remember.
Yeah.
It completely does not trip off the tongue.
Right, excellent.
It's impossible to Google. I mean, all the best best possible things that you could have in a name.
Okay.
So my podcast is called Morrus's Unofficial Tabletop RPG Talk.
Wow, that's so simple.
It's catchy.
What do we think, everyone? Is that an excellent name for a podcast?
It does what it says on the tin.
Okay. Anyway, I can't talk much because I call this show not D&D, but there we go. But going back to the awfully cheerful engine.
We're not allowed to discuss the whole URL kind of conversation we had.
Yes, fine, because you brought it up on live and I can't say no now. So so EN Live, which this range of shows and live streams we're doing, which not D&D is one of. We're trying to think of a name for it, and we want it to be EN something because we have EN World and EN Publishing, and I was trying to come up with a name for a long time, and I spoke to everybody. I was like, what should we do? You know, how should we do this? And I came up with the EN Live, but the website was taken, so I put EN Live RPG, which it says just above. You can see me there, enliverpg.com. Great, no problem. What was the first thing you said, Russ, when I sent you the link? I was like, here's the new website.
EN Liver PG.
Great. Excellent. Yeah. And okay, clearly you're not the only person that spotted this, but you know, we talk about RPGs and it's like EN Live, we're live streaming. What do you want from me? I'm doing my best.
There are plenty of companies with the same exact problem with their URLs.
Yeah, I do apologize. I got something just in my eye, which is excellent during a live stream. So if you see me just kind of doing that, I apologize if I'm triggering anyone, but yeah, this happens when you go live. Yes, hello, we have new people joining us, so welcome. So we are not D&D, so we're talking about tabletop games today that aren't D&D, and today we're talking about the awfully cheerful engine. So talking about Ace, Russ, while I get the thing out of my eye, could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this, and also about the foreword that we have in the book?
In the book, yes.
In the book, well, because it's a comic. I was going to call it a comic book because it's comic book size, isn't it?
So all of these are sort of like 30 pages each issue. So so what inspired it? It was originally one of my favorite games, possibly my favorite non-D&D RPG, was the Ghostbusters RPG from the 80s. I absolutely love that game. It's fantastic. And Sandy Peterson was one of the creators of that game. So that game very much inspired the Awfully Cheerful engine. It's kind of irreverent, it's kind of fun, it's fast, it's breezy. It's written in this kind of conversational, kind of jokey tone. Doesn't take itself too seriously. And that's exactly the kind of style I wanted to emulate with the Awfully Cheerful engine. So the other thing I kind of wanted to do was to have things that were kind of bite-sized, easy to digest, very cheap, and allow me to sort of explore lots and lots of different genres. So what we did was we created a core rule book, which is a comic book-sized book. We've made it look like a comic. It's got like an issue number on the front and everything. So the Awfully Cheerful engine, you can see this tiny little thing. It's like 30-odd, kind of find it hard to do here on the screen, but 30-odd pages, brightly coloured. And then each issue after that is a different adventure. So each adventure will be a different theme. So it could be anything. So we've got Spirits of Manhattan, which pretty much is the sort of Ghostbusters tribute. Montana Drones and the Raiders of the Cutty Sark.
What's that a parody of?
Oh, I've no idea. One called Strange Science, with that's kind of Back to the Future crossed with Stranger Things. Beam Me Up, what could that possibly be?
I don't know.
Orcs and Oubliettes, which is kind of Platetesque, kind of, D&D kind of parody. Yeah, there's a couple more which I haven't actually got the copies of here, but we've also got Domes of Thunder, which is like post-apocalyptic mayhem. What else have we got? We've got Bite Me, which is vampires. And the last one, the next one we've got coming out is, what's the next one we've got coming out?
The one that's fun to pronounce. So accidentally anthropomorphic animal heroes.
Accidental
the best name.
Anthropomorphic animal heroes, which is you want to play a talking turtle or a mouse detective.
A mouse detective, gosh.
Yeah. It's not actually Danger Mouse, but
Yeah, so none of these are actually, they're all parodies. We don't actually have a Ghostbusters license. We're just doing this very tongue-in-cheek and cheeky because we can.
I see Ben Rogers in the chat has said, "What is your favourite Ace issue so far, and why is it the one that I wrote?" Which I don't actually have in front of me right now, but
he wrote Bite Me.
My favourite one probably is, to be honest, Spirits of Manhattan. I think, mainly because that just goes back to the inspiration for the entire thing. It was written by Dave Chapman, that one, and it's hilarious to read. So that's probably my favourite of these, and it's a bumper-sized, double-sized, bumper-sized issue as well.
Fair enough.
And the other cool thing about them is they're only $4.99 each. They're really cheap
for the PDFs.
For the PDFs, yeah.
Yep. And just to do the plug for that, so if you do want to pick up any of those, you can get them at awfullycheerfulengine.com, where you can find out more information. Although ask us here because you can chat, and also there's links to buy and bits and pieces there. But moving on to a question that you kind of answered. So somebody asked, what's your favorite non-D&D system? And you kind of said it was the Ghostbusters one.
Yeah. I think that game will always have a special place in my heart. That thing. I remember playing it. I was like a teenager at the time. I wasn't really used to the idea of non-D&D RPGs at the time. I was so excited. Ghostbusters RPG. It was a box set. It looked amazing. It was like D&D didn't come in, AD&D was like big hardcover books. This was a box set. And probably I'd recently seen Ghostbusters. I imagine it probably coincided with me seeing the film. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was so excited to pick that up. And maybe it might be nostalgia. I don't know. But it will always be special for me, that game.
Yeah, definitely. And Sandy Peterson worked on that Ghostbusters game, which is why he did the kind of foreword before.
Yes, he's done the foreword.
In case everyone wasn't aware of like kind of who he was in the games industry, because I wasn't quite aware of the scale of it. He was involved with like Call of Cthulhu, wasn't he, in the beginning parts of that, as well as lots of other systems. So just to give some people an overview if they don't know who he is. What other credits would he have?
You were telling me about his video gaming, because I'm not really familiar with the video gaming side of his career because I'm not a big video gamer. But you were telling me he worked on Doom and what was there?
Yeah, so the original Sid Meier's Civilization, he was like the fourth person name on that list. He also did Doom, which is the classic game running around, and also Age of Empires, a few other bits as well. So he's done and also the latest big Cthulhu board game, the giant miniatures. Someone in the comments remind me what's that?
Giant miniature doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, the minis are like this big, but that's because they are like to scale because they're real. But I mean, like the miniatures of like the adventurers, the people. Yes, thank you, Mike. It's the Cthulhu Wars board game that has massively. So it's Sandy Peterson who's involved in that as well. So he's done like RPGs, board games, video games. So he's done everything. So he's quite impressed. How did you get him to do this forward for you?
I just emailed him and said, "Will you do the forward?" And he emailed me back and said, "Yes, I will." It was
surprising.
Really?
That was it.
That is kind of 90% of how the RPG industry works. You just ask, and people say yes or no, and more often than not, they say yes.
That's quite cool. I didn't know if it was going to be some cool story. Like we met in a bar, and I bought him a beer. And
trying to play some sort of detective noir sort of music, and it was a dark night. It was a dark, shadowy night. I walked down the street in my trench coat and my trilby. My contact was at the bottom of the stairs. I could see him silhouetted against the light. I gave the password. I'll stop.
No, this is the story I wanted. This is
the story you wanted. Unfortunately, it's not true. But
we're role players. We tell stories that aren't real. We sit in rooms and do that. That's what we do. Adults sit around table and play pretend. Speaking of adults that sit in rooms and play pretend, we're always looking to invite new people to join the table. And Sam asks, is Ace a good entry-level game for those new to tabletop RPGs?
Very, very, very much hope so, because that is exactly what I designed it to be. So
I noticed the introduction. Yeah.
So So talking of like that Ghostbusters game, just going back a little bit, I've got an interesting bit of trivia for you. Did you know that Ghostbusters game was the first ever dice pool role-playing game? That's where the dice pool was invented.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
So a dice pool obviously being where you rolled like a handful, 4d6, 5d6, 10d6, whatever, and you roll them as a big handful of dice. Lots of games have done it since, like the White Wolf games, and loads of games have used dice pools ever since. The West End games, Star Wars game, but that Ghostbusters game was the first ever dice pool game, and I've always really liked dice pools, and dice pools featured in my What's All His New game as well. I'm a big fan of dice pool mechanics for some reason; they just work for me. So and this, of course, because it's kind of very much inspired by Ghostbusters, is also a dice pool game.
Bit of trivia there that I did not know.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
But the question is yes, it is a good entry level game.
I got clued into that by, in the introduction, you have a section that says, what is a role-playing game? So why did you choose to kind of have that in and make it like so kind of entry level?
Yeah, well, I mean, every role-playing game has to have that section, obviously, and depending on how big your role-playing game is, you've got more or less time to introduce what a role-playing game is and how to play a role-playing game, introduce the concept. Obviously, in like a 30-page comic book size format, you're limited in space because you want to get on with the subject matter. But the reason I wanted it to be very good for an introductory role-playing game, because I really want people to be able to just pick it up and introduce people to it, pick it up cheaply, not be intimidated by its size. It's not like 3 great big hardback books. It's just, that. You see it, the way we're going to display it, for example, at conventions is we're going to get a comic book, those rotating comic book stands. And they're going to be one of those. So they're going to look like a rack of comic books. So they're going to be easy to pick up and browse and inviting. They're going to be cheap. Well, they are cheap. So, that's the idea. It's supposed to be like a bite-sized kind of way to dive in without any kind of sort of like great big learning curve or you don't have to do any homework first. You don't have to have a great big learning session. Making your character takes, a minute or something, 2 minutes. And that's
instead of just saying it's so great, let's tell them why it is. So what is character creation in the Awfully Cheerful engine?
Okay. So you have 4 stats. And your 4 stats are, I've got to remember them now.
You have the book in front of you. You can read it. So the character sheet, what I really liked about it is literally a credit card size thing. You have kind of 2 descriptors, which I'll let Russ get into, and then 4, and that's it. Then you're ready to go. So it's all kind of about flavor, really. But anyway, I'm speaking over you. You've got the book open. You now know the rules to the game that you wrote and invented. Off you go.
So you've got 4 stats, and those 4 stats are smarts, which is how clever you are; style, which is kind of how cool you are, how charismatic you are, how stylish you are.
So if I was making myself as a character, that would obviously be really high for me. So what sort of number would that be? Like, is that out of 10 or?
Stress, there's moves, which
moving on. Okay,
moves, which is how quick you are, how fast you are, how dexterous you are, how well you can drive, how well you can run, how well you can shoot, that sort of thing. And then you've got brawn, which is how tough you are, how strong you are, how physical you are. So that's your 4 stats.
So these are really broad kind of stats. So the idea that you can, and in this game we call the GM the director, so it feels more like an action TV show sort of thing, film. So are they just what you can convince the director is applicable? Pretty
much, The director will decide what ability applies. And then, of course, when each of these stats has a value, it might be something like 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in that sort of region, and that's how many dice you roll.
Great,
when you use that ability. And it's that simple. So the director might say, you want to bash that door down, make a brawn roll, and your brawn might be 3, so you roll 3 dice. That's it.
And it's D6 dice.
It's D6s, yeah. And we don't even say D6s in the game either. We say dice because try to unjargon the entire thing.
Definitely. And I think that's as well makes it accessible for people as well, because like people, if you're new to tabletop role playing, you might not have the set of all the funky dice, as some of my friends that don't play it say, but you'll probably have like some 6-sided dice. You'll have seen that when you play Monopoly or something. So
Well, that's the other thing, right? Another part of making it an entry level game really easy to pick up is not requiring people to get hold of obscure dice, but unfamiliar dice. Everybody has six-sided dice around, or if they haven't, they're easy to get hold of. And if you say a dice to someone, they know what you mean when you're talking about six-sided dice.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just part of the sort of entry-levelness of the thing. I think that made sense. It made sense to me.
It definitely does. So creating your character, so you have those 4 kind of stats that you have there.
You do have stats.
And then you have 2 other elements to it as well. Can you talk us through those?
Yeah. So you have a trait, which might be curious or brave or gullible, or it's like an adjective, and there's about 30 odd traits, or you can make up new traits. So you have a trait and you have a role, and your role could be like you could be a gullible dog, or a brave astronaut, or a curious detective, or a I've run out of, I can only think of 3 adjectives. There are only 3 adjectives in the world.
Yes.
It's
I mean, as a writer, that's fair that you'd only need 3.
Yeah. So and like the roles, there's like talking animals, and there's careers, and there's fantasy roles like goblins and orcs and elves and wizards and ninjas, and then there's sci-fi roles. Roles can be pretty much anything. It could be what you would think of as a race in D&D, or it could be a career, or it could be anything. Your role in the game is that.
So you could be like a creepy goblin if you wanted, or something.
Yeah, you could be a creepy goblin. Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Who doesn't want to be that?
You wouldn't want to be a creepy goblin. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, so your role will give you one ability, one special ability.
Mm-hmm.
So like a ninja. So you're a ninja. If you're a ninja, your special ability might be, I haven't got it in front of me, it's probably something like you can turn invisible for a minute.
Or something like that. And the game has a list of abilities that you can pick, or you can make your own. Yeah.
The one ability. It'll be like that would basically be it. You won't have a big old character sheet full of different things you can do. You'll be
because it's credit card size, the character sheet. So yes, for example, you could be a dangerous mouse.
A dangerous mouse, yes. For example, you could be a dangerous mouse,
Yes, and I, people agree with me. Everyone wants to be a creepy goblin. So
Oh, anyway. Many of us are creepy goblins.
Okay, so that's it, kind of for character creation, isn't it? So you have your descriptor that gives you your ability. Do you get anything from the second part there?
Traits. So the other mechanic is you have something called karma.
Okay.
Now, karma is like an expendable resource that you can spend to do a bunch of wacky things.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, when something doesn't go your way, you can spend a karma to re-roll, or you can spend a karma to do a flashback scene, or you can spend karma to do various things. But as you spend that karma, they start to, deplete throughout the game, and you're going to want to get those back. And they can be used to absorb damage as well. So if you fall off a building, you can spend a karma, and you happen to land in a haystack.
Okay.
Like that. So that's what karma does. That gets depleted throughout the game as you use it. To replenish the karma, what you need to do is use your trait. So if I'm a creepy goblin, if I act especially creepy, why did you say creepy? That's a really bad one.
Sorry. Yeah, I just sorry.
If I'm a creepy goblin.
I saw someone in the chat and it came to mind. So
what was I? Oh yeah. If I especially creepy, the director might say, "Okay, you get a bonus. You get a karma back for being especially creepy. You get rewarded for being creepy," which doesn't sound right.
So that reminds me a little bit of Fate, if anyone's played that. So because that Fate points work a little bit like.
I'm given to understand that people have played that. Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on from that? I feel like I touched a nerve, so sorry. Okay. But yeah, okay. So that's kind of it for character creation then. So you've just got those things. Excellent. And then so that's the kind of first chapter. There's 3 chapters in the book. So that's first chapter is creating it, which is that section. Then we have the how to play, which is kind of D6 dice pool, really, isn't it? It's kind of
roll some dice, hit a target number, you're done.
Yeah. So great. So that sounds quite easy. So it's quite easy to actually run as well. So if you've not run a game before and you want to pick something up and do that, maybe that's something I should do actually. In
Maybe
thinking about it. And then the third
UK Games Expo, you could be demoing the Awfully Cheerful engine.
maybe I will. Yes,
Maybe you will.
so we're going to the UK Games Expo this summer. So if you're going along as well, let us know and pop by the stand and say hello. And yeah, we'll be running some games. Maybe I'll be running some Awfully Cheerful engine apparently. But yeah, so going back to the book. So chapter 1 is creating your hero. Chapter 2 is how to play, which is very brief and simple because it's quite simple. And chapter 3 is kind of extra bits. And is that more just like how to kind of run the game? I noticed it had like some standard kind of stats for like baddies and things like that in it.
Yeah. So monsters and baddies and foes, basically a credit card size again, with similar, stats, 4 stats and an ability. So they're pretty similar, very easy to use. Mm-hmm. We also have mooks in there, which are a type of we call monsters extras, by the way, because we've got the director is the GM.
Okay.
You have to roll, so it's almost it's like you're in an action comedy film, kind of like.
Yeah, and I love that because I do, for people that don't play role playing games, I do describe to them as like, think of your favorite film or TV show. You get to be in it and
exactly
walk around in that world.
And what happens as well.
And you get to decide what happened. You're not just doing a script; you're in there kind of making the story. So we're sitting in a room telling stories together. So
so all the monsters, basically credit card size monster stat blocks, very, very simple, very, very, very easy to use. And then we have the mooks, which are basically your kind of generic monster, which the heroes are supposed to be able to just plow through and show off and feel really heroic and just mow the way through all the mooks. So they all just die with 1 hit. They just got like 1 health. They'll all go down with 1 hit.
Cool.
They're just there to let you feel heroic, let you feel awesome.
Yeah, excellent. We all need that moment in a role-playing game. That's why we play them. Exactly. Okay, so that's and so this is so this is the first issue, the one we've just been talking about. But as you mentioned earlier, all the different issues have different themes to them. So do you need the first one, and then you just pick whatever themes kind of you like?
So the first one is the only compulsory one. You need that because that's the rules book. So issue number 1 is the rules.
Yeah.
All of the other issues are adventures.
Yeah.
And each adventure will introduce anything new that you might need to play that particular adventure. So whether, if you're playing, I don't know, Orcs and Oubliettes, which is this one, it might introduce a few new fantasy roles that you could take, or, a few fantasy bits of equipment and stuff like that. So each will have a little bit of extra stuff that you can add to your game to theme it.
Awesome.
And then each of these is also an adventure. So you just play through this, adventure.
And it's got the adventure written in for you, so you don't have to create your own.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So the first half of each of these is basically a little source book. So it'll talk about new character roles and your equipment or whatever is suitable to that particular genre. And then the second half of each one is an adventure pre-written for you.
Nice. So if I want to run a really lazy game, I can just do it straight out the book as well.
Yeah. And the adventures are kind
that's what I'll do at the UK Games Expo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what it's designed for. Exactly. Yeah.
It's almost like that's what it had in mind.
Yeah, it was exactly designed for Jess to run at UK Games Expo. That is why I wrote it.
There we go. We have it sorted there. It's good to know. Well, I'll have to do that now.
Given that you refused point blank to run any games last time we did UK Games Expo.
You still hired me back after I left, so it can't be that bad. We had such excellent other GMs there, so we didn't. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. So, but so we've already talked about the price of these, so they're quite reasonable. But as everybody has turned up here, and we expected 3 people to be here, and there
is the average
in excess of 20. Yes, as we learned in the podcast. But there is an excess of 20. Shall we give these people a special discount so they can buy the Awfully Cheerful engine at, say, 50% off?
I guess we will, because we just did.
Okay, so I'm putting the code in here. So this is a unique code that will only last for today. So you have like buttermere hours, and it's limited for people just watching this stream. So if you'd like to pick up the Awfully Cheerful engine, the first issue for just, I think it's put its for like just $5 for a $5 to get the soft version. So if you'd like that, and perhaps come and run it at the UK Games Expo that we seem to be talking about all the time. so I've put the link in the chat there. It's also up on the screen, but it's in the chat, so you can just copy and paste it instead of having to like type that out, because I appreciate that's a weird.
There is another exciting way you could get them as well.
There is another exciting way. You can get it not for 50% off, but you could also just get it for free, for absolutely free. And I will tell you for how. As mentioned, Russ does a podcast. I was on the episode last week, so all the reason to go listen to it even more. And if you write in and ask a question, and Russ answers it on the podcast, then we'll send you a free copy. So you can get it for free, and the details there.
Yeah, so we've got a brand new segment on the podcast, which we haven't named yet, but we might call it Awfully Cheerful Questions. I think we might go with Awfully Cheerful Questions.
Okay.
And what happens is we will attempt to answer one question a week from a listener. It can be on any topic, as long as it's, tabletop RPG related. We're not qualified to give you medical advice, so don't ask us about that. But if it's tabletop RPG related, we will attempt to answer it, and whoever it is we pick each week to answer their question will get a free softcover copy. They will get this. This is what they will get. This thing here. Not this exact one, I'm keeping this one, but one exactly like it.
Excellent. So we'll send that out to you, and it will get to them probably in like a week or two or so. So it's quite quick.
Yeah. Well, the first time we did this was just this week or last week.
Friday.
Yeah, and already. Yeah, Friday. Yeah, and So I mentioned it on Twitter. So a couple of people asked questions, and we picked one, and that person already has a copy of that on his way to.
There we go. So so you can do that with the hashtag Awfully Cheerful Question on Twitter, or on the Facebook groups we have, or you can email the email there. So you can type that in there. We can give you legal advice, but it will not be useful or correct.
I may or may not be a lawyer. One of those two things.
Were you a lawyer before you worked in RPGs?
I was not a lawyer before I worked in RPGs. Or was I? No, I wasn't.
Okay. So I think we've talked a lot about the Awfully Cheerful engine, which is excellent, which is the meat of what we came here to do. So if you have any questions about that, please ask us now. But we're going to move on to a different section of the show now, which we have every week, where we discuss a topic related to RPGs. And this week we're having a very difficult question, which is how to find a party, how to find a group. So I know a party. Like as in a D&D party. This is not D&D, so a group. So that's why I changed it to group, because I'm slick like that. And no one noticed either. No. So I got away with that. No one noticed, it's fine. So we're talking about how you find a group of people to play RPGs with. So I know a lot of people watch actual plays online. Like it's been like 7 years of Critical Role, wasn't it, just last week? A lot of people have watched that and been like, that looks like great fun. I want to join in and get involved in that. And that is kind of the question. So I wanted to kind of know how, if people watching could write down where they found their groups. So that would be interesting to kind of crowdsource for the people here. But I was going to talk about for me, how I found role-playing games in general, and then some other different ways that people can find a group. So if you're looking to play and want to play maybe the Awfully Cheerful engine, you can do so. So for me, I did it at the kind of, I think it's a bit of an old school way. I found an RPG club. So a shout out to my local club in Bournemouth, which is Bournemouth Berserkers, which I went to. And I'd never played role-playing games before. I played some Hero Quest as a child, and I'd like kind of found that in the attic and dusted it off when I was on a family holiday. And I was like, this is fun. I need more of this. And so I kind of Googled. What's that?
Who did it belong to then?
The Hero Quest copy?
Yeah.
It was my childhood copy. I still have it. It's
I see. I'm sorry. I thought you meant you found it when you were a kid. Yeah, okay.
Oh, I found it again. No, I had it as a child. It was my copy. And then as an adult, when I was in my 20s, early 20s somewhere, I found it in the attic and we played a few games. I was like, oh, this is fun. And then so I went on there and played my first ever role-playing game, which was a World of Darkness hack kind of zombies game, which is great because I love a bit of survival horror. And then, that role-playing club, I was there for a number of years. There's someone else from Bournemouth Berserkers here as well. So, yeah. So if you are in a club as well, please do put them out here so we can shout out, because I think clubs are a great way to kind of meet people
I'll
and
shout out my friend
games.
Peter Coffee Club as well. Then in that case,
Yeah,
Southampton Guild of Role Players. Peter Coffee, who is my co-host on my podcast every weekend, also runs the local, and I believe it's got like 40 or 50 members. It's going really, really well. And I don't know what it's doing during the pandemic. I assume it's kind of
moved online maybe.
But yeah, he runs the Southampton Guild of Role Players, which is a great club. Definitely, if you're in Southampton or the area, that's a great way to get introduced to new people.
But I think there's clubs all over the place, really. So I think if you just Google your town or area and RPG club, you might strike gold with that.
It used to be, definitely.
What's that? Sorry?
That kind of wasn't a thing, as far as I could remember when I was like discovering.
Back in your day.
Would I have known? I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe they were there and I didn't know because I didn't have the secret password.
Definitely. So meeting at kind of RPG clubs would be my recommendation, because that's how I found, and it really escalated because it escalated into kind of the whole career. And along the way, I did open a board game cafe called Coffee and Dice, which is where Sam first started role playing, apparently. And so I think also your friendly local gaming stores, generally those have become real hubs for meeting up and playing games, because they're keen to kind of to showcase what RPGs are, because then you can buy your books from there. So it works very nicely with that. So so I definitely think local game stores, conventions, as I mentioned before. So they're fantastic, and you get loads of RPG and gaming conventions kind of everywhere. You can research them. We in the UK are going to the UK Games Expo and Dragon Meet this year. We're kind of taking it a bit slow because of this whole plague thing that's happened. But next year we'll be doing a lot more conventions as well. So hopefully we'll see people out and about there. So conventions around there. And the other thing I had for meeting people in person is to become a GM yourself. If you're wanting to give it a go and you've got a group of friends that want to give it a go, none of you have ever played games, the stakes are really low because they're not going to know if you're doing it wrong. If you're GMing.
Of course, so much because they will know you're doing it wrong.
Why would you say that? I tried to just lower the bar. So those are kind of my in sort of person ways I was doing it. But also, as people have said, online is an excellent way. You can always game online, because it doesn't matter where your location is as well. So so if you live somewhere really rural, you can still get online and play. Or perhaps if you can't travel to get there for whatever reason. And Steph's mentioned there Roll20 is great. So roll20.net has I've got an excellent banner here that will show up there. So Roll20 is really great. So it has a find a group option. So you can click on that, and then people that are running games and want players, you can scroll through them and pick out the game you want, which is fab. Warhorn.net as well also does a similar thing. So you can just go on there and scroll through and look through a range of different games that are looking for players. And you can filter and specify specific things. Lost that word there. So if you want to play a particular genre or a particular system, or you want to play with like certain types of people, or you can specify that in there, which is really good. Someone else mentioned as well, you've got forums. So someone else found their players in EN forums. So there is Gamers Seeking Gamers forum on there where people still post, and I checked, and someone a few days ago had posted looking for a group. So that's still kind of an active space on there. So gaming forums. There's also Meetup, RPG Table Finder, look for a group. So there's lots of places online where you can try and find a table if you're willing to kind of do that online instead of being in person as well. So that was kind of my summary for it. I guess I was going to say, Russ, how did you find your groups? But it sounded like probably when you were in school, you were just like in the playground.
Well, I didn't really get to do it twice, I think. So when I was in school, and I don't remember how that happened. I think one of my friends just brought a game into school and whacked it down on the table and said, let's do this at lunchtime. And we all just went, yeah, right. So I think
did you know how much that would change the course of your life?
Exactly. So I think that's how that happened, but I wouldn't swear to it. Later, so when I finished school, I went off to uni and stuff and stopped playing for about 2 or 3 years. Because, when you're at university, you've got important things like drinking to do instead. And then
you can do both at the same time.
Apparently you can also do coursework and exams, but, allegedly.
Yeah.
After that, the people I was living with after that, I don't know how it happened to be that they all happened to be role players. Honestly, I don't know how.
Just
I don't
gather
know how that.
nerds around you.
Maybe
That
it's
happen.
just sort of like attracts like, and you just end up hanging around with nerdy people, and they happen.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so we were all kind of living together, and there was like loads of us, and we started up a group guild, a few years ago, and that group basically it's had people come and go over the years, so it's definitely not the same group now that it was then, but the group itself it's kind of like the old what do we call it, ship thing? What was it? The ship where you replace all the bits? Is it still the same ship?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it is. And someone in the comments will know. It's
I'm sure they will. Yeah. So basically, there's a couple of people that were in it back then still, but basically people have come and gone over the years. But the group has consistently pretty much played every week, every couple of weeks for 20 odd years now. It's amazing.
That is really nice and quite rare. I know a lot of people really want to get games going, and they start a game, and then I think it's tricky because we're all adults, we have jobs and schedules and families and other commitments, so it's hard to kind of make the time. Yes,
Theseus, that's the one.
Theseus, that's what I knew. I was like, we're on the internet. If we say something wrong, someone will tell us or correct us. It's fine.
that is apparently the way to get responses on Twitter. Say something wrong, and you'll get 1,000 responses. Or make a typo or something in what you say, or just get one fact wrong in what you say, and you'll get tons of engagement.
Well, there we go. Noted. I'll do that on our social media page. So if you see spelling mistakes on our social media, I've done it on purpose just to trigger you into reaction. But anyway, so so some other people were saying other places to find RPG groups, which is there's a Reddit for people looking for it there, which is LFG, looking for game, and people have also said there are great Discords, and of the particular publishers or streamers that have those communities around them. But so I think that's kind of hopefully given people, if you are looking for a group, somewhere to kind of go with that. So the last thing on our kind of schedule, because we're coming up nearly to the top of the hour again, where we'll end the stream. So if I told you,
but it didn't.
Oh well, it flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? We talked about doing the stream earlier, and Russ said, are we really going to spend an hour talking about this? I was like, yes, I can 100% spend an hour talking about RPGs, no problem. We'll find stuff to talk about if we run out talking about Elfily Cheerful Engine. But the last topic I wanted to talk about is, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, is kind of favourite RPGs, other than the ones we've been discussing, that's not D&D, is the rules. You've kind of said Ghostbusters, so do you want to pick out another one you have, just to put you on the spot and make you think about it?
At the moment, I'm quite enamoured with Free League's Alien RPG.
Okay,
that is awesome. I've got like a library upstairs with like 1,000 games in there, of which I've played like 10. Because
that's a real shelf of shame. Like over 900 books.
I like reading RPGs. I don't know why, but I like reading RPGs. I'm quite happy to buy one to read.
I know a lot of people that do that, actually. I'm not that person.
For me, it's like maybe I'm weird, but for me, with RPGs, half of the hobby is playing the RPGs. Half of it is collecting and tinkering with and writing and doing prep work for. And it's like people who play Warhammer. Half the hobby is buying and painting miniatures, and they like doing that. And for me, it's kind of like that with RPGs.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So it's not just about the play; it's the whole thing around RPGs that I like.
Fair enough. I've got some people in the chat sharing their favorite RPGs that are not tabletop. They're not Dungeons and Dragons. They are tabletop RPGs. Wow, we're getting too many in the words there. So that is not D&D. For me at the moment, one that I played that I really enjoyed was Mothership. They have their Kickstarter, which they're fulfilling. and I played that with some friends as a one shot, and it was really great fun. I got to play a really cold, unfeeling robot with very kind of GLaDOS vibes in my mind, and also a touch of I can't do that, Dave, which is great to just freak everyone out on the table and be that way. So I really enjoyed that, and I've got another game of that coming up in a few months as well, where a bunch of friends were going to meet up and do a load of one shots. So that's really good.
One other game I'd like to call out then is a game called Dread, which was introduced to me by my friend Kevin Culp, who I've seen in the chat. So he's around, but years ago. So it uses a Jenga tower as the game resolution mechanic.
Have you read ahead? Do you know that there are guests next week?
Are they?
Yes.
Excellent.
Did you actually not know?
No, I did not know that.
So. Carry on with your brief summary, but this segues really nicely into the ending.
I had no idea. Okay. Yeah, I see. Dave said Dread, not that Dread, not as in Judge Dread, Dread as in DREAD, which is
like the horror of the situation.
So the core resolution mechanic is a Jenga tower. So when you try and do something, you've got to take a block out of the Jenga tower, and that, especially coupled with like the horror theme, can make it really, really, really tense to play. I mean, I don't think there's any mechanic I've ever seen which just ratchets up the tension in a tabletop RPG the way a Dread Jenga tower does.
Exactly, yeah. And I was so cool. I saw that a number of years ago and we played it, and it was great as a one shot, and it's just really fun. And it does actually build the tension really nicely. And that's so funny you mentioned that, because I didn't think you knew next week's guest. So I'm going to segue into it. So next week's guest, we are talking about this game system Dread that Russ just talked about there. So it uses a Jenga tower as the main mechanic. So we're going to speak to Ebediah about that, the writer and who wrote that. He's going to come on, and the topic is going to be building tension in your horror games. So obviously we're going to talk about how that's done in Dread with the Jenga tower, but we're going to talk about other ways that we can do that. So this kind of wraps us up really nicely to the end of the show. So first of all, I want to say to everybody that came and watched, thank you so much for coming to watch, because I really thought it was going to be me, Russ, and my mum, and it wasn't. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed the show, please share it and tell people about it, and come and watch next week as well. So we'll be running. Yeah, sure, running. This is like running a game. Exactly. It'll be happening every Monday from now until I get fired. Yeah, you can. So we're streaming on wherever you're watching now. We'll be streaming there again. You can also keep up to date with what the show notes are on social media or on enliverpg.com. So if social media isn't for you, we have our website, which has an interactive calendar. EN Live RPG. So thank you so much for coming along, everybody. I hope just a reminder that you do have that discount code, and that will just be for today, and it is limited just for kind of a small number of people that were here. So if you do want to get Awfully Cheerful Engine for just a $5 with a soft cover, if you pop on to Drive Through RPG, and the links are also in the chats, go and help yourself. Russ, is there anything you came to say that you didn't get the chance to say?
Put me on the spot, why don't you?
Yeah.
I know.
I know. This is not D&D. That is our D&D book.
Look at the size of that as well. Look.
So that is Level Up, which is our advanced 5th edition, which is shipping at the moment. But that is compatible with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and so we're not going to talk about that here today. But if you would like to talk about that, on the 17th of March, we're doing an EN Publishing live stream where we're going to talk about Level Up systems. So if you do want to talk a bit of D&D on the 17th, if you take a look on EN Live, you can come and watch that. And that'll be quite an informal kind of hangout there. I can't remember the time off the top of my head because I'm professional that way, but it is on our social media and on the website there. So on that note, I think we're going to head off. Russ, thanks so much for coming, and being a guest on the show, you kind of had to, because you're the boss. So
yeah, choice, did I? I was kind of told rather than invited.
Yes, and also we have a plug for the podcast there as well, so you can check out the archives on there if you want to hear talk about Level Up. All right, thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed the show, and we're going to end the broadcast now. Thank you very much. Bye.